Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. Like Steve said, my name's Seth. I work at Etsy on performance with these fine folks who are all here at Velocity. So if you want to chat about performance at Etsy, come talk to any of us. You can also find these slides online at this URL. So, who's responsible for performance? I'm going to infer from your attendance at this conference that many of you are responsible for performance within your organization. If so, you may have found yourself at times feeling like a performance cop or a performance janitor, which is not a great way to feel. And if you've ever experienced that, you probably would agree with me that that's not sustainable and is not the way to get lasting performance improvements in your organization. So I'm going to ask this question again, and I'm going to try to emphasize the rhetorical nature of the question. Who's responsible for performance? If you want real improved performance within your organization, everyone needs to be responsible for performance. So another way to say that is performance culture. And this is what I'm going to be talking about, is how to kickstart a performance culture at your organization. How do you get a performance culture? Changing culture is hard, probably the hardest thing. Actually making performance optimizations, there's a bunch of rules on some websites that I've read. It's just a simple matter of programming, right? It's easy. But changing culture is a lot harder. The squishy bits are something that we're not as good at. At Etsy, we spend a lot of time thinking about culture. We spend a lot of energy on it. I would say that performance is not a solved problem at Etsy. Performance culture is not a solved problem at Etsy. So it's something we're still struggling with. But I want to introduce one weird trick that we've used to kickstart a performance culture at Etsy. Take you back 2 years, set the scene a little bit. We had the idea that we wanted to increase our focus on performance at Etsy. And we had a lot of things going for us at the time. This was an idea that was coming from the CTO at the time. So we already had management buy-in. This is something that was already kind of accepted throughout the engineering organization as something that was a good idea and that we should focus on. We already had a really good engineering culture, very metrics-driven, data-driven. We had, for example, some dashboards on the wall showing back-end server times for a few important pages. So we had a lot of the ingredients that you would need to maybe consider yourself to have a performance culture already. But what we weren't seeing was improvements in performance across those pages, and we weren't seeing feature teams across the organization taking responsibility for performance and making those improvements. So we borrowed an idea from ourselves. We at Etsy for a few years have been publishing financial data on our community blog for our seller community. So this was kind of there was a transparency that we were already comfortable with, sharing with our community and making ourselves accountable to them. So we had this idea that maybe we could set up a site performance weather report to inform the community about the importance of site performance and also let them know that it was something that we were taking really seriously and therefore make ourselves accountable to them to show some improvements. So in 2011, we published our first site performance report. The idea here was that we would just put a stake in the ground and say, this is it. This is a thing that we're going to take really seriously. We're going to make improvements, and we're going to show you in this public space that we are making those improvements. One thing to note about this first post is it didn't contain any measurements at all or any discussion of methodology. This was just the point at which we kind of jumped off the cliff. And we would, from this point on, if we didn't publish our performance numbers, we'd look a little silly. So we were kind of committing ourselves at this point. But despite not having published any numbers or done any of that, we are already kind of setting ourselves on a course where we have to act. One of the first things we have to do is choose what metrics we're going to share with the community. This is something that's a little harder than it sounds. There are infinity different ways to look at performance. And internal to your performance work, you probably want to look at those different measurements. But you can't overwhelm a lay audience with a bazillion different numbers. You have to choose the ones that are the most important, or maybe the most representative, or something. So what we chose was to look at a few key pages that we considered core to the Etsy experience. The 95th percentile back-end performance, because that's what we had on hand. And we just looked at it on a weekday, because our weekend traffic is lower. That felt like cheating, so we were going to look at a weekday. But really, whatever works for you, what I want to emphasize here is, like, don't get paralyzed trying to consider what is, like, the number that is most representative or the, like, best number. There's no one number that defines your performance, and it's better to just keep it simple. If I had to give one piece of advice for choosing what numbers you're going to share, I would make it understandable, easy to communicate, both to a public audience, but also to your engineering team, because then they know what it is that they need to be optimizing for. If you saw Pat's talk yesterday, he said the numbers that you publish are the numbers that people will optimize for. So for us, we chose those numbers, the 95th percentile, because that was what we were going to use for an internal SLA. I'd say the same advice applies for setting SLAs versus setting the sort of numbers that you want to communicate publicly. Keep it simple, make it easy to understand. SLA, all you have to do is put a threshold on it, and you're done. So if you don't have an internal SLA, this is a good way to figure out what you want to be your internal SLAs. Another reason not to get too hung up on what numbers to choose is that you can totally change it later. We did. You want to keep some consistency so that you can show from report to report, do kind of an apples-to-apples comparison. But things are going to change. For example, in our first public report, we published averages rather than medians, and we all know that averages are terrible because the outliers just totally throw you off. But now I've told you that, and you won't use averages, you'll use medians, so you'll never have to change. Except now we're using Internet Explorer 8 as part of our aggregate front-end performance metrics. Internet Explorer 8 market share is totally declining. It's going to be gone in like a month. And then, are we going to continue to use IE8 as our benchmark? No, we're not. Also, we use the DSL connection on web page test for our defaults. The default on the public instance recently changed from DSL to cable. So at some point, we're going to have to catch up with that as well. Things are going to change. As long as you have a way to explain it, you'll be fine. Another way that just publishing this initial post with no metrics or methodology in it forced us to act was that we had to get our tools in order. We had these back-end graphs, but we didn't have a good way to say, push a button and get a report and publish it, and then do it again 3 months later and be confident that it was apples to apples. So we had to kind of work on some of our infrastructure for reporting and know that we were able to measure that and know that we would be able to do it again. And then, guess what? Now we have a super tight ad hoc performance monitoring system that we could use for ad hoc analysis and analyzing performance regressions. So now we have all our tools in place. It's time to publish our first performance report. Here is a chart from the first post. It looks really sweet. You might notice one number stands out here, and that's the homepage performance, far and away the slowest page on the site. This is for signed-in traffic as well. I want to emphasize that. But and if we were looking at medians, maybe it would be a little better. Like I said, averages throw everything off. But this is terrible no matter how you look at it. So we definitely had a moment where we thought, maybe we should not publish these numbers. But we have to, right? We said we would. So that's one of the great mechanisms of this trick, is that you have committed yourself to publishing this performance data, and the performance has already happened, right? It already was somebody's reality. So in that respect, let's just tell them what it was. You might also feel at this point that it might be worthwhile to hold off publishing the report for just a month until we get performance below some threshold. I would advise not to, because I guarantee that threshold will always be lower than what your performance is now. And so you will then never publish, and also your performance will not improve at a rate that you might like. You might also think, maybe we could just reconfigure these numbers or something to present them in a better light. Cheating. I would advise not to do that as well. These numbers are not as private as you might think. For one thing, your users are already experiencing them all the time, but also perhaps you've used a site called httparchive.org. It tracks site performance for hundreds of thousands of sites across the internet and has speed data associated with them. I'll tell you another story. We published a site performance report showing a great improvement. We were really excited about it. We got a congratulatory email from a performance monitoring vendor saying, "Congratulations on that recent site report. Here's a graph that we've been collecting on you for the last year that shows the same thing." So people are watching. It's not that scary. It's also a good thing for this to be a little embarrassing, because this is going to motivate you to make change and make improvements. When we published this performance report and saw the homepage was so terrible, we immediately did some investigation and saw what was so expensive about rendering that homepage, and then did a little digging and saw that feature that was so expensive was also not carrying its weight and wasn't providing the conversions that would necessitate that much server time. So we killed it. And I could probably give a whole talk about a performance engineer's role as an angel of death within a product team, and maybe I will next year at Velocity. But so that is a direct correlation between having published the site performance report and seeing a direct improvement on performance on the site. I've also seen other examples. There was a time when search was the slowest feature of the site, and 2 or 3 performance reports in a row of search being the slowest. The search engineering manager called a code red and spent 2 weeks doing nothing but improving performance. So that brings me to a point which I think is really valuable. When we initially published the site performance report, we considered that we would be publishing for our community, to a lay audience who would not be very technical. And the idea was just to make ourselves accountable to them and be on the hook for performance improvements. But it turns out there's another audience, which is your engineering team, and you are definitely communicating to them what you expect them to do as far as performance improvements. There's even a third audience that, as I was writing these posts, I obviously considered, which is the community of web performance professionals who might be scrutinizing the methodologies and performance numbers. And I'll just say it's really hard to hit all 3 of these audiences, from a very non-technical to a technical but maybe not specifically technical to a very specifically technical audience, all in the same medium. So if you're considering this, you might want to consider multiple venues for publishing this information. As I look back at that first post, there's other things I'm a little embarrassed about. I'm actually not that embarrassed about the numbers anymore, because we fixed them. But the structure of the post itself was not great. Numbers are boring. They don't tell a story. There's absolutely no context. It's hard to read. Let's look at this again. My eyes. It's terrible. But what does tell a story is graphs. Looking at this graph, or this is a chart from our second performance report, the one immediately following. And you can see now this is comparing August to November, and its averages still and 95th percentiles. You can see that the homepage now, which was by far the slowest, is by far the fastest, and it's really stark looking at the graph that this is the story of this performance report. We said we have terrible performance and we're going to address it, and then we did. Boom. Which is also just a fun thing, right? This is a great venue in which you can celebrate performance wins. Usually when you're doing performance work, it's invisible. When you get these victories, you don't get the splashy product launches like other features do. We had a site performance report where we got to publish this graph. This is moving to Sandy Bridge processors, and on some pages this was a huge improvement. And so, like within the team, we were going nuts about this. And so, but having this public venue in which we could share this data was really great. Kind of gave it the sense of a launch. I think this is an important enough idea that we have extended it, and I just want to give you this idea as well, to have an internal dashboard showing just people who have made significant improvements to performance recently and put faces to graphs. I think celebrating wins is a really good way to increase performance culture in your organization, and this is a way to do it outside of this structure of public site performance reports. So great, we get to celebrate these wins, and we get to kind of show the whole story of performance, provide an ongoing context. For example, we did a post where we compared our site performance now to the first post that we ever did. And in what other venue would you be able to say, yeah, performance is better now than it was last year? See? It also gives you an opportunity to talk about regressions. Performance doesn't always improve. It's a sad fact. But having a place to talk about why that happened is really important, again, for all of the audiences. Here is a post from the site performance report that we published yesterday. So we have green bars are time to start render, and orange bars are document complete times. It's newest on top and oldest on the bottom. And if you look at this listing page, that's the one that really stands out to me here. We did a complete redesign of our listing page, and it came in a lot heavier on fonts and images. So that would totally explain this document complete time almost twice what it was on the previous report. But if you look at the time to start render, it's half a second better. And when we were iterating on this new design and working it out, we did A/B testing on business metrics for the new design versus the old design, and the new design definitely converts better. So here's a case where we see that, probably time to start render in this case, I'm really proud that we were able to do the work we did to improve time to start render, and it might be in this case that the time to document complete is actually not that important to us. So this gives us a chance to talk about that, and if it continues, we're doing further investigation on the impact of the fonts and images on this page. But if it turns out the document complete is not a measurement on this page that is a driver for any interesting work, we might drop it from the report. So once you've started publishing these site performance reports, each one doesn't have to be the same as the next. In fact, they shouldn't be. You can iterate. And for us, we started with back-end performance because that's what we had available, and we didn't have good front-end performance monitoring, especially for repeatable aggregate measurements. And now we do, but it's because with each performance report, we said, well, it's starting to get embarrassing that we're not publishing, synthetic report or a RUM report. I guess we have to get our tooling in order. Again, it forced us to get our tooling in order to get that together. This is the graph from the post in which we introduced front-end performance. And this was either, I forget, the last post in our community blog or our first post in our engineering blog. We decided that at this point it was just becoming too difficult to talk about performance to a very non-technical audience. I don't know if anyone's tried to explain CDNs or deferred JavaScript to a very non-technical audience, but it's not easy. I am really excited about how we put this graph together, though. You can see we overlaid film strip views with bars to really highlight visually what it means to get start render and what document complete means. Another fun thing about this graph is that if you look at the listing page, it has an almost 3-second time to start render, which is nuts. I don't know how that happened. Actually, I do. But we didn't know that that was happening until I put this report together, and that uncovered this bug that was really easy to fix. I think it had to do with an order of scripts in the head or something like that. It was really simple, but we wouldn't have noticed it until we were starting to put this report together to talk about how we were doing. So again, just by the nature of putting this report out, we found and solved a performance bug. So, like I said, that's the time when we moved this over to our engineering blog, and we found that that was a very good venue for being able to have a much more technical discussion about the sort of work that we were doing. Around that time, Steve posted about synthetic monitoring versus RUM based on one of the posts that we had done, and then we were able to do a follow-up post about how we use RUM at Etsy. That sort of discussion would never have been possible in our community blog. It just we wouldn't have been able to do that. So again, consider your audiences when you're thinking about who you're writing for and how you're going to present it. We've since moving over to the engineering blog, we've had one follow-up on the community blog that was much fluffier. It was kind of like a, yep, site's good sort of post. And then we're continuing to do the more technical posts on the Codescraft blog. So what's next for us on these site performance reports? So this is actually me using this trick on myself. I'm now going to state publicly what we're going to do on the site performance report. And now if I don't do it, we'll look silly. I think we could look a lot closer at geographic impact of performance. So start reporting in a digestible way how our visitors from around the world are experiencing Etsy. Similarly, mobile and other latency-constrained networks. So look for that in an upcoming site performance report. So we've seen some of the ways that this trick can motivate your team to get its act together, get some improvements in place, get some tooling in place. There are aspects of this that I like even more, which is that it seems like by making this public declaration, you're really putting an emphasis on what you care about. So you're saying, hey, look, this is a focus of ours. This is something that we think is very important. And obviously so. Do you see how it is public for us, this declaration? And that's something that can be talked about internal to the engineering team. So the question would come up, is performance really important? Yes, look, blog posts. And then further on, that works in a different way. We encourage all of our candidates coming in for interviews to read our engineering blog before they come in. And it's really fun for me when I'm in an interview and I say, I work on performance. Oh, by the way, have you read our engineering blog? They say, yeah, I just read it. I saw the site performance report from last week. You guys are doing really good. And so for those people, by the time they join the team, that's just the way it's always been. It's always been a team that focuses on performance that is really important. That's something that's really important to them. So, but at the same time, this one weird trick, that's like a joke, right? This is not a silver bullet. This is not going to just get you a performance culture right out the gate. Working on a performance culture is something that needs attention and dedication, but this was something that really helped us get moving in a direction, get started. I want to take a second to acknowledge that I know that I'm lucky to work in a place where this sort of transparency is kind of a given, and that we might not always be so lucky to be able to be so open about our numbers. Hopefully I've given you enough material that you can sell it upstairs when you go back to your place of work. If it helps, you can tell them I said it worked and that it was good. I have office hours later today if you need more ammunition. I'm also interested in seeing everyone publish their performance numbers for personal reasons, or selfish reasons. I want to see your numbers. I'm curious. But I think we all benefit as an industry when there's more data about numbers and strategies and techniques that have worked. So I think we will all benefit if we all share. I'm also interested in hearing any other techniques that people have used for encouraging performance culture in their organizations. So let's have a dialogue about that. So that's it for me. Thanks very much. Questions? Yes.
What do you think about status pages? Amazon's got a nice one. Salesforce has a nice one.
Totally. Yeah, GitHub, I think, has... Yes. What do I think about status pages? Amazon has a good one. Google? Salesforce. I like GitHub's a lot. Also, it has kind of like real-time graphs. And I haven't seen the Amazon or Salesforce ones, but with GitHub, you can do go back to a month and a year. So I think that is really badass. It's very much more transparent than we are being. I hope that we can even get to that point. I think it misses a little bit with the context. If you see a graph take a big change in a direction, what happened? So I think it's great. It's super transparent. I think yeah, I'm for it. Yes.
Considering that you have a dedicated performance team, do you see any tension between performance team and actual developer teams about your team feeling the deficiencies in their work and something around that, if you do or do not, and how did you achieve that or how do you solve it?
Yeah. So Etsy has a dedicated performance team. Do we see a tension between the performance team and the engineering team? Well, that's definitely something we were trying to address with this. I think it's it can be an unhealthy dynamic to say the performance team is accountable for performance. Accountable to the CTO, something like that. Because then, if you don't get good performance, it's the performance team's fault. But like I said at the beginning, performance is everyone's responsibility. Even if it's the situation where it's... So one thing I like about this one weird trick is that it puts the entire engineering organization accountable for performance to an external entity, like to your community or transparency. And I think that's helpful for eliminating those sorts of dynamics. That said, yeah, I think we still, we as a performance team want performance more than other teams do. And that can be hard sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did the published metrics help? How does that
right.
help more or less than getting business metrics?
As far as right, how do business metrics impact making a case for working on performance? Yes. Yes, a lot. We've started running a lot of our performance optimizations as A/B experiments themselves, so that we can really easily tie the changes to business improvements, and that has helped a lot. I'm interested in introducing the cost of performance more into the kind of experiment-driven pipeline. I would say that this trick, this publishing and being transparent, was very helpful for inertia, for getting things going. And obviously, if you are in a place where you need to sell the case harder than we do, I think business metrics speak to audiences that can make decisions.
Do you feel there's openness to sharing those types of stats?
Would we share?
I know you've shared some.
Yeah, I think we would. Yeah. Is there an openness to share the impact of performance on business metrics? Yeah, I think there is. Sure. Steve.
I'm surprised. It seemed like there were two surprises as you did your reports.
So the question is, it seemed like there were some surprises, and wouldn't we have caught those before we published the report and fixed them, I guess, before we published? Yeah. So I think the two surprises you were referring to is the homepage one in the very first report. And so, yes, maybe we could have not published until we had fixed it. But I kind of think the best thing is just to rip off the Band-Aid and say, this is terrible. Because it had been that slow for a year before we published the site performance report, and it never got any better. And then, yeah, as far as the listing page, the document complete time, I think, was the surprise there. Yeah, we did get a little surprised by that. And that's, part of that is a redesign and a ramp up, and not having the proper metrics around, like, what is the new thing going to look like versus the old thing in time. But yeah, we're still working on that.
Any particular suggestions as to how we can, the last slide was, now it's your turn, you share daily blogs, or I see your blog. Is there any other places that we can kind of pour in, collaborate?
Yeah. Is there anywhere else that we can share that's not, say, a blog? Yeah. Well, if you're sharing your company's internal information, that's going to be a policy decision that, doesn't really matter where it is. It's just whether you have permission. But yeah, that'd be kind of cool if there was a central location where we could all aggregate our performance data. I'd be into that. Yes.
Similar question before. Do you have performance metrics built into product designs, like for product management? They say, build this and it needs to perform in 8 seconds or less.
Yeah. Do we have performance metrics built into product launches? Not yet. Yeah. Yeah, I want that. Yeah, we have a tool that's kind of a combo launch calendar and kind of launch analysis. It'll show you the results of your A/B experiments, and I'm excited in the next few months to add some bits to that tool, kind of a, yes, I'm ready to launch, and here is the link to my webpage test results sort of thing. But yeah, we don't have that yet, but I think that would be really useful. All right, cool. Well, I have office hours at 5:45 if anyone wants to talk anymore. And, I'll be around and my team will be around. So thank you all for coming. It's fun.